say we've got a playing field here. A typical playing field might be 100, say a soccer field is usually about 100 metres this way, right? By 60 metres this way, roughly.
Yeah.
Right? And so you've got a shed, usually they've got a shed somewhere like this, and the water point might be coming from this particular shed. So what we do is we put the control box up here on the wall, and then we'll take the main line down to the centre of the field about here, right? Where the water's coming in this way.
Yeah.
And then what we do is we cut a trench across the top here, right? And hook the water into the main pipe here, right?
Yeah.
And then we'll have sub-mains coming off to each section, like this.
Yeah.
And then they will have separate pieces of pipe
coming across
the field.
Yeah.
And then what we'll do, and they're zones, so these are all controlled by solenoids. So each zone can be controlled, right, back to the main controller.
Yeah.
Then we'll actually cut the lines in with the trencher all the way through the field down to the other end, right?
Yeah.
And we usually go outside the field a little bit. So even on the sidelines here, we might have a zone where it actually comes out past the side of the field.
Yeah.
All right. Then we'll cut a footer trench down the bottom here, right? So where these lines actually hook into, they have a flushing valve in each zone. So what that means is you can flush all these lines out periodically.
Okay.
All right. So we run it the length of the field.
The whole length up and down.
That's right.
Spacing's obviously determined
by soil type and the soil test that we do to determine what we would use. For example, in a lot of playing fields might be 0.7 of a metre between lines.
Okay.
Others might be 0.6, some might be 0.8, some might even go up to 1 metre wide, and generally up to about 20 centimetres deep.
Okay.
And that allows them to aerate the field over the top.
Yeah.
They can aerate down to 100, 150 deep, because that's where 90% of the root zone is.
And with these heavy machines aerating stuff, it doesn't make any difference to your system underneath. It's not going to squash it or anything
as long as it's 50 to 100 mils above that, it's not going to squash it. They can top rest the field each year.
Yep.
So this can be all automated, back to a control box, and also put a rain sensor on, so the whole thing can switch off when it's raining.
Great.
And we can also put moisture probes at strategic places in the field as well, just 2 or 3, which then relay back to the control system to say, okay, we're wet enough, switch off.
So they'll just monitor the water
that's
actually in the soil.
And for installers like yourself, we also have a computer program. You give us the length and the breadth of the field. We type in those numbers, the soil type, the flow rate that's chosen for that particular soil type.
Yeah.
And it'll spit out all the parts that you need that field in a few minutes. And if you want to, you give us your square metre rate for installation, etc. You can give your customer a price back the next day on a playing field.
That's great. That's fantastic. Yeah.
And we also can check using different programs the length of run here and how wide this pipe should be, like what the diameter should be.
Yeah.
It might vary from 20 metres to 100 metres. So we've got to make sure that the header line coming down here is going to give you enough flow into all these areas.
And you can also monitor the flow of water through there, the flow rate, and how much water's gone in.
That's right. What I'd be doing here, in this case, all of these solenoids will be buried beneath the ground.
Yep.
And also, you might have a main control box just here.
Yeah.
And that'll have a flow meter in it as well. We usually insist on having a flow meter on every field. So you can go back to the council or whoever it is and say, okay, in last summer, you used so many kilolitres on this field compared to what you previously used.
Right.
A 100 by 60 field should take about 3 days with a tractor
to completely install,
to put the runs in.
Yep.
But usually a 100 by 60 field will take 3 guys about 4 to 5 days, maybe longer depending on the depth that you have to go to do the field. So it's very competitive against sprinkler irrigation and against drip.
Yeah.
For example, drip irrigation might have to go in at 30 to 40 centimetre centres. Now, drip per lineal metre might be a little bit cheaper in cost than the below flow or these products, but they've got twice the number of fittings.
Yes.
You've got twice the amount of labour in connecting that all. So it makes a big difference. And as we know, labour is one of the most expensive components. That's right.
Yeah.
And there's minimal disturbance. So basically, they can play in the field the next week.
Yeah.
And you can then, if you wanted to, you can roll the whole field.
Compress it, roll it.
And roll it.
Okay.
And you can also put in a fertigation bypass unit in the field as well, so you can fertigate the whole field.
So you'd be able to fertilise the whole thing from underground.
That's
so you wouldn't
right.
have to do anything above surface.
That's right. Here on the field, we can also put in a tech filter, so you put all your filter systems up in here.
Yeah.
Right? Sometimes, if it's a very long run, they might put them down here.
A second one in?
Yeah.
Or
just one closer to the field so you don't lose flow and pressure.
Yeah.
Now, as far as tech filters go, that's the one that Netafim makes, for example. You have to change it every 200 hours
200
or
hours.
thereabouts.
So
What that means is about every 2 years.
In
a
running
playing
time,
field.
okay.
Yeah, so that's something you have to make sure of if you're installing for councils or something like that. They're aware. And there are different products you can use. We can wrap anybody's drip tube, basically. But if you're using, say, a Netafim product, they have a tech filter that injects a small amount of herbicide into the line, which when it goes through, it just will come out into the soil particles just around the dripper, stop any root intrusion. Or you could use Toro, which has a root guard product, which actually has a herbicide built into the filter, into the dripper itself.
And how often would you need to do to put that through on that?
Well, the tech filters you have to change about every 200 hours.
Right, so that's a maintenance.
That's a maintenance thing,
Yep.
yeah. On Toro, I think they've got a warranty, I think, of about 10 years, I'm not sure, but about 10 years they've done tests and shown that there's no root intrusion on there. The other thing is that installers want to know is, well, how cost effective is this going to be?
As compared to a system they might have already had or
That's
looking
right.
at getting.
For example, a sprinkler system around the edge here, or they might have to put 3 or 4 lines of sprinklers
So
going
a
across
conventional
here.
pop-up.
Conventional pop-up system would cost on an area like that anywhere from 25 to 35,000. We can do a field for that, or you will be doing a field for that for about 30, 35, somewhere around that. Now,
So
it can go up also depending on how many bells and whistles the client will want, but it's very cost competitive. Plus the other thing, we're going to be saving, up to 60% less water than drip, right? And we're going to wet up 300% more volume of soil, right? So that's an important thing,
So basically, as far as cost-wise goes, they'll be saving that back in water.
Back in water, that's right. And they can play in the field while it's irrigating. So kids or people can be playing on this field while it's irrigating.
Oh, so actually, as opposed to a surface system where you've got, say, a sprinkler and someone's falling on it and hurting themselves.
Well, that's another issue, yeah. Many times you'll get, in soccer or rugby especially, where they might fall onto a sprinkler point which is just below the grass level and they can cut themselves, So that's quite an issue. The other thing is with sprinklers, in some cities now you can't use overhead sprinklers, or they've actually closed some football fields because they've become so hard because of all restrictions, because of insurance reasons.
Yeah, I've heard of that.
So we can still irrigate, even when the restrictions are quite hard, like Stage 3 in Sydney at the moment, we can still use the system.